Okay, so I well could be wrong about this, but I did pick Duke to win it all. And my logic was simply Duke has Cooper Flagg and nobody else has Cooper Flagg. So what have you seen so far from that very young man in tournament action?
Well, first of all, that's good logic because the old days you could tell a Final Four or national championship contender by how many pros do they have, and Duke's got a lot of pros. They probably have more pros than any other team. I think they're the most talented team. Flag is he's a different cat now. It's not only his skill set and his size and length. That's one thing. He's got everything you want in a basketball player, but it's his level of competitive spirit and character.
Yeah.
I think he's a lot like Leitner was back in the '90s. That there are levels to everything. There's levels of shooters. Guy could be an outstanding shooter, but then there's Steph Curry or something like that. There's levels of competitors, and this guy is on the top tier of competitors. Nothing phases him. He's not afraid of anything, and he plays every single play like it's the only play of the game.
Yeah.
And very few players do that. He's in a different category that way, and I think honestly that's what sets him apart. There are other uber talented guys but he's on the top tier of those two. And when you think about, he's only 18. He just turned 18 in December. It's kind of hard to fathom a kid being that good that early. And he's already gotten better over the course of the season. I think he's the best player in this tournament by far.
So you do a lot of work on the NBA draft. What would you say is his NBA ceiling as you see him right now?
Perennial all-star. I think Grant Hill is the best player Duke's ever had. And I think he proved that not only in college, but with what he did his first 6 or 7 years in the NBA. Yeah. He was the direct counterpart to Jordan. He was 5 times all NBA his first 7 years in the league. I mean, that's Hall of Fame by itself. He was like, I always likened him to like the Sandy Koufax of the NBA. That level of performance didn't go on a long time because of injury. No. But
that's a good analogy. Yeah.
When he shone brightly, he was among the best to ever do it. And I think Flagg, I feel like Flagg's the best player that's been there since him. I really, really believe that. And I think if you compare Cooper Flagg to Grant Hill as freshman, it's Cooper Flagg. Now, will he turn into what Grant Hill became later on? We'll see. But he's got that sort of aptitude, both ability-wise and his makeup, because Grant didn't see himself as being the best player when he was a freshman. This guy does. Yeah. They're wired differently as young people. Now, Grant ultimately became all that.
He did.
But he did. I don't think Grant had any idea how good he was when he was 18. This guy knows.
Okay, take it a level higher. I think we all regard Larry Bird as the greatest American white player ever. How close could Cooper Flagg get to Larry Bird?
In everything but shooting, maybe passing. I mean, Bird was an extraordinary passer, the likes of which we don't see very often, even among the greatest passers. He is not the shooter Bird was. No way. But everything, he's bigger. He's way more athletic. He's way better of a defender. He's an impact defender, kind of like Pippen was an impact defender. That's
good,
the kind
good
of
analogy. Yep.
Or Kirilenko, guys like that.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to he's got some Bird-like traits, but boy, you kind of hesitate to compare him with that kind of ceiling. I don't know about that. That might be a bridge too far yet, because I'm sure if I saw Larry Bird, and I didn't, when he was a freshman, I would have felt differently about Larry Bird as a freshman. When he was a senior, and you remember that, Skip, that was back when Game of the Week was literal. When I have
Singular.
friends,
Yep.
Hey, the game was better back then because, boy, we could watch Larry Bird for 4 years. I'm like, stop it. You didn't watch Larry Bird for 4 years.
Nope.
You watched him for 2 months his senior year. Guys were not on television back then.
No.
We didn't have this kind of ubiquitous 25 games on a night. And you saw the Missouri Valley Conference whenever you wanted and could watch it on your phone. We didn't have that. Most guys, most people probably, when they read about Larry Bird, didn't know whether he was black or white at the time. And they found out when he was a senior,
Yep.
but they probably didn't know it before then or before he was a junior.
Good point. Yeah, first time I laid eyes on television on Larry Bird was in the regional final against Sidney Moncrief's Arkansas, which they won in an upset. And then here they came against Mark Aguirre's DePaul in the national semifinal. And I was there in Salt Lake for that. And he knocked my eyes out. And then it led to a watershed championship game against Magic, obviously. But remember, Larry was 23 years of age at that point. So he'd been playing a whole lot of college basketball.
Yeah, and that's sort of the difference between now and then is now you're having to project out a Cooper Flagg as to what he can be.
Yeah.
And you're going, we need to – I think one of the things I try to do, it's not always easy, is you try to look at, okay, if I'm comparing him to this guy, what was this guy as a freshman? Because that's what Cooper Flagg is now. And there are a lot of great players that don't get to Cooper Flagg's level when they're 23. And he's doing this at 18, and look how much better he's become in 1 year. The knock on him at first was he couldn't shoot, and now he's knocking threes down at a high percentage, and he's being guarded, and he's putting up these ridiculous numbers. He doesn't seem to care whether he scores, passes, or all that, but he plays his tail off every possession, which doesn't always happen at any age. He's special, and he's one of the guys that I feel strongest about coming into the draft at an early age. Like LeBron, I felt like I knew. Like this guy, LeBron was the best high school player I had ever seen. And when I sat on the air,
got it. Agree.
Well, I got criticized for that. Like, how can you say that? And I was like, because he is. I mean, he's better than Kobe Bryant was at that age because he's more physically imposing with all the skills. He's better than Garnett at that age. And they say, well, what about Alcindor and Oscar Wright? Like, how old do you think I am? I didn't see Lou Alcindor when he played in high school at Power Memorial, but I felt that way, and I feel similarly about this guy.
And yet, as you know, Cooper Flagg is 3 months into his 18th year on this planet, and I agree with you about the shooting. I can't go Larry Bird on the shooting, but I do give him a chance to continue to improve over the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years, because in 20 ACC games, Cooper Flagg made 44% of his threes. He was low volume, but he still made 44%. So I think there's potential there to get better as a shooter. Not maybe Larry Bird great, but pretty great.
I agree. I mean, he's going to continue to get better, I think, in every facet. I just wouldn't classify him as a natural shooter. That's not who he is. He's a natural in so many other things, but his shooting is going to continue to improve, and to where I don't think it's going to be an issue for him. He'll have to be guarded on every space, every area of the floor. That's how talented he is, and he's going to blend in with any team seamlessly because he can do so many things, and I really believe this about him, that winning is the most important thing. Like this is a I hope this is not too weird of a story, but early in the season before the season started, I was up visiting some different places and watching practice, and I happened to be at Duke, and John Shire asked me, hey, would you mind speaking to the team? And I always preface those things when I talk to the team by saying, hey, I sat where you're sitting, and I loved it when a 60-year-old guy came and gave a lecture. But while I was talking to him, Flagg was sitting as I was facing the team. He was sitting to my right, and he had a notepad out, and he was taking notes of what I was saying. And honestly, my first reaction was, here we go. Eddie Haskell is over there taking notes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And but then I realized after time and talking to him afterwards that he really wanted to learn something. And not that he learned anything from me. I'm not saying he did, but he takes advantage of opportunities. And as long as he's in there, he's going to take advantage of it. He's just kind of built a different way. And I wouldn't have done that. I would have been waiting. Coach K had some great people speak to us. Not that I put myself among them, but I'd be thinking about, when is this going to be over so we can move on?
Exactly. Yeah. I don't think that's a weird story. I think it's a very telling story, and I appreciate you sharing it. And by the way, I would share with you, I'm close friends with Rick Barry. Do you know Rick at all?
Very well.
Obviously before your time a bit, but Rick was a great player that a lot of the kids today just can't appreciate, but he was a 6'7" gazelle, could just run the floor, very athletic, and could shoot it, and shot the granny free throw underhanded and made 91% career. And Rick can be a little bit of a curmudgeon and a skeptic about today's players. And when I asked him about Cooper Flagg, he just laughed and said, he's special. He's way better than I said, Rick, better than you? Oh, come on. I couldn't jump like this. He can quick jump. He can second jump. He just said the whole package is better than what I had. Well, that's when I said, oh, okay, I'll take that to my bank from Rick Barry.
Yeah, and that shows, like, Rick is one of the more cerebral, thoughtful basketball people I've ever been around, to the point where you can't get through a meal with him because he's diagramming plays using salt shakers, and he actually does that. But I think that's one of the great things about some of the older guys, that myself included, when you're willing to say, look, we had our time. Like, let's look at what these guys are doing now and kind of marvel at it. It doesn't mean that if Rick Barry didn't have all the tools of today with the rest and recovery and how players are brought up in the game and all that they wouldn't be just as good, if not better, if you move these guys back in the day and they had the obstacles that the players in the 60s and 70s had, that they wouldn't, it wouldn't be the same. Of course it would be the same. But I marvel at these young players and what they're able to do, because the game is so different now. It's so much harder to play now than it used to be. Way harder. Like, Rick didn't have a three-point line, and nor did I. And when my friends now that I played with will say, well, these big guys aren't doing this or that, I go, come on, man. Like, that guy just had to guard 4 ball screens and then get back down the post and switch out. And we never had to guard a single ball screen when we were in college. And not one. Nobody ran them back then. Our jobs were way easier than these guys. And I marvel at what they do.